Nobody likes the French. To prove that, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody outside and in between, you just have to look at the 7 times when almost all of Europe banded together to destroy one, for his time very averagely sized man. But while this man was trying to conquer Europe, all another man wanted was to sip some wine to the sweet tunes of the Kastelruther Spatzen. Andreas Hofer was born as the first son but fourth child of an innkeeper in 1767 in St. Leonhard in the Passauer Valley, a small, very Catholic, one-horse town in the Habsburg Empire. Napoleon made his grand entrance 2 years later, in Corsica. Since this was the time when you could still buy everything, including European countries, Corsica came into French hands and Napoleon was sent to a military school in France, did a little revolting, was a general during the First War of the Coalition, made a coup, and became first consul in 1799. Meanwhile, Hofer came after Harry Potter, with his parents dying when he was young. But instead of cloak and wand, it was lederhosen and rifle for him. After marrying, he took over the inn at home. In fact, his wife ran the business, while he was a cattle and wine dealer. The religious Hofer too started a political career, only dialed back a lot. He was elected to the local government, the Landtag, and proved himself as a commander in the War of the Second Coalition, after which Napoleon crowned himself emperor. Because sequels are always cool, Europe decided to do the War of the Third Coalition. This time Austria was humiliated, and Tyrol ceded to France, who passed it on to Bavaria. This was suboptimal for Hofer, because even though the Bavarians also liked lederhosen, they were on team beer all the way, meaning Hofer's sales plummeted. To that came bans on religious things, which caused further irritation in the populace. But what is better than a sequel? That's right, another sequel. The War of the Fourth Coalition came and went. But during the sequel, the fun begins. Napoleon needed men, also from the Bavarians, who came into Tyrol looking for said men. But that was not okie dokie, because according to the Landlibel of 1511, no Tyrolean could be forced to leave Tyrol to perform military duties. So, what did the Tyroleans do? They glued themselves on the streets. They started an armed revolution. Routing slips, sawdust in rivers, and fires on mountaintops called the men, and the fight began. Because of the partly civilian nature of the uprising, the combatants had to resort to unorthodox methods. For example, how do you kill the Bavarians with the cannon over there, when you don't have any cover? You take highly loaded hay carts, put your fighters inside, Trojan horse style, and let them be delivered to the unsuspecting enemy by some courageous mates. It didn't take long for the rebels to reach Innsbruck, the capital, and take it after the First Battle of Bergisel on April 12, 1809. 2 days later, Austrian aid came in the form of General Johann Gabriel von Casteller, who proved useless because when the French and Bavarian forces started advancing from the north, destroying and burning the villages in their way, he promptly fled, allowing the French to take the city again. Now was Hofer's time to shine. He became commander-in-chief and organized together with his generals the second recapturing of Innsbruck. His generals being Josef Speckbacher, a poacher/miner, and the fanatic Hespinger, a Capuchin friar, who was the type of person to oppose the smallpox vaccination because he believed that it was a ploy to infuse the Tyrolean souls with Bavarian thinking. After the successful Second Battle of Bergisel, Innsbruck was once again back in Tyrolean hands. But just like the child of an anti-vaxxer, the enthusiasm of the Tyroleans was short-lived. They might have won a battle, but Austria lost the war. Tyrol was once again ceded to France. And this time Napoleon wanted to keep control. But just like Confucius said, if you want to have control over somewhere, you first have to get there. And that was easier said than done. 500 Saxons, for example, found an early death after the Tyroleans figured out environmental damage was on and built some stone avalanches. Then, later, on the 13th of August, followed Hofer's biggest triumph, the victory of the Third Battle of Bergisel, where 15,000 Tyroleans were successfully able to fend off 20,000 Saxon, Bavarian and French soldiers. But the rule of Hofer was not all sunshine and roses, since he let his Catholicism shine through a little. In laws such that pubs had to be closed during Sunday Mass, bans on balls and parties, and the rule that women had to cover their flesh unless they wanted to have mud thrown at them. The Habsburg King Francis, trying to keep his lapdog happy, even sent him a chain of honor and 3,000 ducats. But not even a month later, after another spanking by Napoleon, he continued to not give a shit and was forced to cede Tyrol to the French again. Stunned, Hofer turned to what he knew, seeking solace in alcohol. He was ready to negotiate, but a fanatic core around Father Haspinger was able to persuade him to call to battle again. This time morale was low, and the Fourth Battle of Bergisel was an easy victory for the French. Hofer fled and hid in a hut in his home valley, until his neighbor betrayed him, collecting a 1,500 guilder bounty. After his capture, he was brought to Mantua, where he was executed following direct orders of Napoleon and a short military trial on 20th February of 1810. But how did our second protagonist fare in these trying times? This war, the War of the Fifth Coalition, was also one of the last victories for the French general. What followed was the invasion of Russia, the War of the Sixth Coalition, a holiday on Elba, the War of the Seventh Coalition, and his retirement on St. Helena, where he died in 1821. If we look back at the Tyrolean rebellion, we see that it was short-lived and brought mostly death and destruction upon the country. In the end, Tyrol came back to Austria after the War of the Seventh Coalition, where most of it managed to stay until now. Today, Hofer is hailed a hero by the Schützen, critically examined by historians, and not much cared about by the rest. And that was all for today. Sleep well and try to say Oach Katze Schworf.